All right, everyone, let's do this. How are you? Welcome to this week's episode of our podcast. It's called Is Breakfast Included? Thanks for stopping by. On the show this week, we talked to Karl Newton, better known in the industry as Snake. Snake is a front house guy. He's been with Duran Duran for a long time. He's also worked for Harry Styles, Spice Girls, tons of other bands. He's took some time out of his day. We tried to do this on tour, but we were just so busy. But he took some time out of his day to talk to us, let us know how he got started. Talks about his background in religion, how he chose not to do that. He wanted to be a musician and how that led him to be a front of house guy. Tells that whole story. It's pretty interesting. And we talk a little bit about the industry. All right, guys, it was a lot of fun. Let's check it out. Okay, man. Tell everyone who you are, what you do.
I am Snake Newton, and I am a front of house mixer. So I've been doing it for quite a long time. Always front of house, never really monitors, but yeah, that's been my forte.
So did you start as a front of house guy? I mean, is that what you didn't start like flying gear and?
No, I started as a muso.
Oh, okay.
The story is quite funny, you know, considering I mixed Duran Duran for such a long time. When I was a teenager, I was a computer nerd, and then I found music, and I found specifically the bass guitar. And Duran Duran was one of the, you know, big, massive, what's the word? Influences, I suppose.
Yeah.
So John Taylor has been, you know, your boss in some respects. It's one of the reasons I do this. And you know, I was in a band. I played bass. I thought, you know, how is my band going to get noticed? Bands just typically sound rubbish, you know. So I built a PA, make my band get noticed by sounding brilliant, and what got noticed was the sound and not the songs. So then other bands started coming to me and saying, "Hey, do you hire your gear out? Can you come mix our band?" That's how I started. It literally fell, you know, fell off the tightrope of musicianship into the jaws of audio.
You know, I think that's a common story with guys, the cats who have been doing it for a while. Like all the new cats coming in, or you know, you hear, "Oh, I went did this." Like I said, you know, did you start flying PA? Because that's how they get you first started. Was there any was music big in your family? Any musicians in your family?
Came from church background.
Oh, you did?
So yeah. So parents were, my mother was a Methodist deaconess, and my father was an Anglican priest. So in the Caribbean, in Trinidad.
Okay.
So we're not talking sort of oldie English hymns here. We're talking, you know, full on what you used to call a trap set, you know, drums and you know, organ and guitar and bass.
Yeah.
Of course, definitely bass in the Caribbean sort of style.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of my starting point, I guess. My first memory as a kid was it's kind of bizarre when you look back and you think how things sort of affect you later on. My first memory, literally my first memory, was like being about 4 or 5 years old in Trinidad and Carnival, and the floats coming past you with the big sound systems on, and feeling the bass and the bass drum. Wow. It's like one of my very, very first memories was that. And then it sort of, I guess it just sort of goes latent in you and then hides. And and then it wormed its way out at a later date.
And all these years later, you're still feeling the bass and drums.
Yeah, exactly. That's where it's at.
Did you ever feel that you growing up, did you ever feel you were going to end up in the church, like following
No.
your? No, you knew
No, I was too lazy at first, and then I just got into computers so heavily. Really sort of very early on programming games. My other path would have been not finding music, and I'd have ended up working for a games company.
Okay.
Definitely, I'd have been a tech head. I'd probably live in, somewhere in San Francisco or whatever.
Up in Silicon Valley.
Yeah. Programming, Rage on 17 or some,
running some type of incubator up there.
yeah.
That's interesting, man, because I think I mean it's two different industries, but kind of the tech is always moving forward in both of them, and you have to stay kind of. I know when I started this, I was not young when I started, but quickly moved from analog to digital, and now modelers, and I'm just always like, slow down,
Yeah. And there's always so much to learn, and so many things that, I mean, computers, they're still full of bugs, the programming and stuff. I've just spent the afternoon trying to, work on something, in Windows on my Mac that runs the computer that is my, mixing console. To, I used to turn up and drink half a bottle of Jack Daniels, twist some knobs, make stuff sound nice.
Yeah. Speaking of that, you said you started with your band. Other bands started calling you, and that was kind of your way in. What was your first? I remember a story you told me a long time ago. I don't know if it was your first gig. You were mixing a comedian.
Oh yes.
But I don't know if that was your first major gig.
Well, it was kind of like was the first sort of. Yeah, the first. His name was Norman Collier.
Mm-hmm.
And his gag, that he was known for, was the mic cutting out. With the stuff that that is it. And I'm mixing this. This is the biggest gig that I've done. It was bizarrely enough, like about 400 or 500 policemen at the Cleethorpes Winter Garden. It was a policeman's ball. and he was like the comedy turn. So he gets up there, and he's telling his jokes, and then suddenly mic's cutting, and I'm like, oh my God, the mic's cutting out. Oh my God. So I rush up there while he's doing his gig, which it's his gag. And I'm trying to give him a mic that I know is working. And he's sort of brushing me off and telling me to sit down. And I'm like, no, I just want to give you this mic that works. Yeah, talk about a baptism of, well, it wasn't fire, I can tell you. It was a baptism of something else. Yeah.
Did all the policemen think you were part of the gag? Like, you're the guy?
I don't know. I think they just thought I was an idiot. Which I kind of was, but I'd never heard of this guy.
Yeah.
I was a 19-year-old, that didn't know anything about stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
I just knew music, and suddenly I'm doing this. It was just basically, a variety gig. It was an interesting moment of. I think that's probably why one of the reasons I dislike getting on stage so much.
Yeah.
Being laughed at by that many people, and not because I told a joke.
Hey man, we've all had those moments. Yeah. We've all had those moments. What was your first big? Did you have any before I get into that? Do you have any mentors that kind of helped you out along the
No,
way?
no, not really. I kind of my imagination. That's kind of my mentor. I've always sort of uh, relied heavily on how I imagine things should sound,
Yeah,
and then in some respects, it holds you back not having a mentor, but in some respects also, it's you don't learn anything that keeps you in the box. You just try things out, and
yeah,
if you can make shit work, and I'm the sort of guy that's like, if something doesn't work, I'll try and I'll keep trying, and and people have said to me before that like you're insane, you're sitting there for hours, and then eventually you'll have a breakthrough, and they'll go, oh, okay, you're
yeah,
insane, but it works now.
yeah, yeah,
That's kind of I'm very, very, I hate losing when it comes to sort of um, having things, not people. I'm not competitive like that, but having things stand in your way.
yeah,
I'll always try and find a way around a problem. Uh,
yeah.
but yeah, it all comes back just to imagination, really. I think something should sound a certain way, then yeah, I'll try all sorts of crazy shit until it does. um,
Um, you've worked both in the studio and in live settings. What do
yeah.
you find the differences are? Which one do you prefer?
Uh, well, funnily enough, when I left Grimsby, which is where I sort of started my PA company, and came to London. I sold my PA because I wanted to get into studio stuff, um, and it kind of crumbled well for me in that within a few years, little did I know, so many of the big studios went to the wall.
Mhm.
Um, and while I was in London, looking around for more studio work, I got a job with mixing a band called Spin, originally live, who was, there was a vague Grimsby connection there. So they said, can you come and mix our band? They had been signed to Stephen Street's label. Stephen Street was the producer, engineer for a lot of the Smiths and Blur,
Mhm.
and that was sort of, that was really big at that time. So suddenly I find myself working for a band on Stephen's label. I think I did a few bits with Stephen that I really learned from. He's a very heads down, you joke and say he's a camel because he'd hardly drink anything all day. He wouldn't eat anything all day, and he'd never go to the loo. And he'd be sat in front of that SSL for like 15 hours straight. And you'd go, has he even got up once? In the whole time. um, but yeah, he told me it wasn't mentoring so much, but one of the things I remembered so very, very much now, looking back and listening to his stuff, especially the stuff of the Smiths. Oh my God, I know you think the Smiths is Morrissey and Johnny Marr, but you listen to the drums and the bass, and they're absolutely cooking.
Mhm.
And he said to me, if you get the drums and bass right and get the vocal on the top of it, you can almost get away with anything. I mean, not that he was a person that got away with stuff,
Yeah,
but he was basically saying, if you get the drums and the bass right, the rhythm section is going to cook. You're in popular music, then you're most of the way there.
yeah,
It's drums and bass. I think the way they drive a tune, that it's very central, much more central than a lot of people realize. I think
yeah,
um, and sometimes getting to that point is, and also because that's the first thing that gets laid down a lot of the time in this, on tape. I say tape. um, you know, uh,
showing your age.
yeah, definitely showing my age. Yeah, that can be, it can be quite a laborious process.
Yeah.
Getting the old the rhythm section down and actually get it grooving, and then building on top of that, because they are the foundation, really.
Yeah.
But
And
yeah, I came. Sorry, go on.
No, I was gonna say, and every band has a drum and a bass player, but they're always different. Like you just can't.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. It's almost as characterful as the lead singer's voice.
Yeah.
The way the drums and the bass interact.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess I ended up working for this band that Stephen basically was his record label. Then when I was 23, on the way back from a show with them in Birmingham, the van that we were in broke down, and we were hit by an articulated lorry on the hard shoulder, 4 o'clock in the morning, and nearly killed. I broke my back in 3 places. Didn't work at all for like 18 months, nearly 2 years actually, thinking about it. And that was a big change. And I guess by the time I sort of got back to the reality, kind of didn't have that much interest in the studio side of stuff. Although I did dabble. I did spend time in quite decent studios, but so many of them were shutting down. And everybody was, in that line of work was clamoring for, fewer and fewer jobs,
Mm-hmm.
crazy. Townhouse closed, it's just too long a list. I mean, think about Abbey Road only survives now because of its heritage, and
Yeah.
it does tours, and it got listed by the council. So, that was going to get turned into blocks of flats, but the council listed it, said, no, you're not doing that. That's how precarious any of these big studios are. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy. But I guess my heart has always, despite the fact that I moved to London to get out of live, it didn't take long for the bug to come back.
Yeah.
And then the studio side of stuff just became a sort of a bit of a spin-off. And, I think it's served me really well because, I have that mindset of like live, of experimenting with things, because I've done it in the studio, and this doesn't sound the right way, so I what can I do to make it sound the right way, instead of just going, it's not a very good sound, and deal with it. Because obviously you wouldn't get away with that in the studio. You could spend hours and hours trying to get a guitar sound, or a keyboard or a bass or whatever. So but
and these days,
so I came back to live.
Yeah. And these days, because of technology, you kind of take the studio with you everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, on Harry Styles, I actually mixed the whole entire show, from the whole entire tour, actually, from after COVID, in basically what was a mobile studio, backstage or in the back of a truck with sound treatment in the truck.
What
and
was
that
the reason
worked.
for that? I'd heard stories about that. It wasn't,
Well, it was twofold, really. Harry's show was actually quite complicated, and I didn't really feel in COVID times that it was something that could easily be, passed to a dep.
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing my best to sort of keep myself out of harm's way. But also, it's quite a loud environment, very, very loud environment at times, and it makes it difficult to make informed mix decisions, and people would say, well, you can't hear anything for the first 3 songs anyway, so what are you bothered about? But actually, with that mindset, you'd say, well, it's won't bother mixing it at all. Just turn some stuff on, and we'll endure a barrage of noise for 3 songs, and then when the audience calms down. But in actual fact, of course, it doesn't work that way, because some venues and some audiences are very sort of much more respectful. You go to Japan, and it's like, oh, okay, so they're listening to the first 3 songs instead of just screaming and and losing their minds. Which in South America, they'd be losing their minds for the first 5 songs, but then equally they'd be singing rather than screaming.
Yeah.
So it's very different all over the world. But mixing in the back of the truck, I really enjoyed that, and really enjoyed how much detail you could drill down into. Obviously, my front of house system tech played a massive role in that. He would make a few notes, every night. It'd be like, this might be a bit bright, or, this was a bit louder than it should be. Interestingly, the hardest thing there was like mixing the dialogue between songs. It was really difficult to actually gauge how loud I had to make the talking.
Yeah.
Whereas the rest of it, was, I'm not saying it was easy, but that was the times when my front of house guy would send a message, would be like, oh, can you back off the talking like a couple of dB?
Yeah.
Because we had a messenger running as well during the show, so he could type me messages that would pop up on a screen.
Oh, okay.
Or he could, because it's a lot easier to do that when you're mixing, rather than to see that rather than hear him trying to communicate with you in his ears. So
to me, that's the worst, when someone's trying to talk to you on a radio or something during the show, and
yeah, and you're like,
you just
what?
nod.
You
You
have
just
no
nod your
idea.
head.
Yeah. What did you say? Oh,
Yeah.
the house is burning down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that worked out really well, so that was kind of like, just like exactly your point, you take the studio with you,
Yeah.
and it really was, it's like I mean, obviously it's not something that would be easy if you had just studio experience or just live experience. I think being a hybrid really helped.
Is that a technique that would work with every band, or just a
Yeah, I
an
mean, if
artist?
you're doing a long enough tour, I mean, I did, bizarrely enough, on the other end of the spectrum completely, I went and did S Club.
Mm-hmm.
Went from 1 vocal to, there were 5 vocals actually. And yeah, the MD on that, he was brilliant, and knew exactly what he's doing. He'd done them for years and years. But he was kind of unconvinced at first, because he couldn't get his head around that I wasn't mixing for the room. He couldn't get his head around the fact that the person that's dealing with the room is the guy that actually should be dealing with the room, which is the guy that's put all the speakers in there and has control over all the speakers. Yeah. And what I'm doing is providing a mix that is, well informed, firstly, because you can hear what you're doing, and consistent. So if I can produce the same thing every night, mix wise, then the system guy has a much better chance of getting it right, and getting it right quicker,
Mm-hmm.
than, a lot of guys that do my job will understand the sort of dichotomy, really, of the band walks on stage, the place starts going nuts, the screaming starts, the lights go down, PA's on, it gets really loud. You're in an environment that you're not that familiar with, because it's just another arena.
Yeah.
So, and then the vocals too brash. So immediately I go, okay, I'm going to take a bit of this out of the vocal, and the guitar's a bit too harsh. So I'm going to take a bit of this out of the guitar. And then, all at the same time, the system guy is going, oh yeah, there's a bit too much 2K and 3K in the system. I'm going to take a bit of that out. So now I've taken some of that range out, and he's taken some of that range out. And then suddenly it's a little dull. And I'm like, I've overcooked this. But then that song ends, and we move on to the next one. And I snapshot that song. So I've now baked in the mistake from the room that will now be in a mistake again tomorrow
in
another room, in a different room. So, and then, the system engineer and myself will react to that mistake, compounded by the fact that it's in a different room.
Yeah.
So it's in some ways I get it, that you'd be, worried about that, but it depends entirely, I suppose, on the mix and the competency and care of the system engineer.
Yeah.
But yeah, Simon, the MD for S Club, he was like almost like, I really think you should come back and be in the room. I think it would be better if it was, in the room. And then we did the first show at the Manchester Evening News Arena, or whatever it's called now. And afterwards, he just came up to me and gave me a massive hug and just went, that was amazing. And it was a total convert, and up to that point, I was like, I don't want to sort of backpedal here. I really, I had production on my side as well. So they were like, no, he's staying in the truck. That's how it is. But Simon was just straight up honest enough the next, that day, just to go, God, that works so well.
Yeah.
And in terms of stress and anxiety, being in a truck and thinking about this, I think I'm quite bad with my plane analogies. I go back to planes an awful lot, but I think even the best pilot would be unnerved in turbulence. They wouldn't give a shit about. Yeah. Let's face it, So pilots don't care about turbulence from their perspective. They can care about it from the passengers feeling uncomfortable, not because they think the plane's going to fall out of the sky. But I think even the best pilot would be a bit unnerved if he was piloting the plane from like economy class at the back when you're going through heavy turbulence and people are literally screaming, and oh my God, this is terrible, and stuff's, people are praying. So I think, from a stress point of view, doing it in the truck's better as well, because you're just doing your job. You
don't have all of this. Yeah, you don't have all of this around you.
Doesn't matter how many times you do a 100,000 seater, it's still an intimidating thing for the moments at the beginning of the show, for sure.
You don't have the fan tapping your shoulder going, I can't hear the guitar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or some guy at the front of the tower looking at you going, sticking his fingers in his ears. Yeah. Give me a moment to get this right. I'm sorry you spilled your drink in turbulence in first class.
Yeah.
No.
Man, please stop praying. The sound will get better.
Exactly. Oh my God.
How do you prepare for a new tour? I mean, you do a various different acts, Harry Styles, S Club, Duran. How do you prepare for them differently? Or do you prepare for them all the same?
some things all the same, some things very differently. Try and figure out what they're about. Try and figure out, what on a personal level, what people who I'm going to have to deal with. Because sometimes you have to deal with some real horror shows.
Yeah.
Of personalities. I try and avoid them, but sometimes, occasionally, one will slip through the net. But I think I tend to listen to the music of obviously whatever band I'm doing, but then I don't over listen. So I, in that respect, I might lose a few of the details, but hopefully, if there's an MD involved, the MD will point out anything that I miss. But I try to aim at a situation where I listen to something enough to know the songs without going into too much detail, so that you get a really broad picture of how it should sound, but without being totally clouded and locked to the record, because you could chase down that rabbit hole and it would lose the liveness.
Yeah.
And
by listening to the sound, like knowing the song, are you talking about it's the dynamics of the song? Like you just know the song, you just
and the hook and because at the end of the day, if you're mixing Come Undone, for instance, by Duran Duran. It's very loop heavy, has this tambourine hi-hat loop that runs all the way through it. If you didn't listen to it on the record, you would probably bury that. And then it wouldn't sound like Come Undone, because it's such a massive part. In fact, I remember Nick Rhodes telling me that it was, that the blend on that loop was kind of a mistake, a happy mistake that worked. And then they printed it. It was back in the day. It's not on Pro Tools. You can't just undo and and rebalance. They printed it like that, and then eventually thought, oh yeah, that's a bit heavy on the hi-hat and the tambourine. So I try and get the sort of core elements of a song and what is the main driver of a song, and go from there, but without getting into too much detail. I guess because imagination wise, you imagine how a song, or I imagine how the song should sound in my head. It might not be specifically as per the record, but then I want to leave some room for interpretation of what the band's actually playing now. I mean, this is another thing about, you listen to records, and sometimes, more than sometimes, quite often, I get people saying, yeah, God, that sounds better than the record.
Yeah.
And, some of that is like, oh, that's a really good, compliment to me. But the other thing is that, having seen the process and worked on the process of, and being in the studio, like I say, you're putting down the drums and the bass, and you're working it out as you go along, and then you put the guitar on top of it, and you're working it out as you go along, and then all of it is like that. It's an experimental build. Unless you've demoed that song to the point where you know exactly what you're doing, writing in the studio like that it can take quite a while. And then what you end up with is a song that's sort of a first generation. But when a band's been playing a song for a year on the road, it takes on a new life.
Yeah.
Which, lends itself, in my experience, to that thing where people will say, God, that sounds better than the record.
Yeah.
Well, because we've all ironed out the kinks, myself included. But, the band's learned that if we do this, we play it this way, or that sound, or change the sound of the guitar, or play it with a slightly different groove, or the timing of the vocal, or whatever. It takes on that live magic, if you like.
It does, yeah.
That doesn't exist on a lot of recordings, because the recordings are just so sort of almost a work in progress.
Yeah.
That ends up getting to a point where it's like, well, this is finished now. We got to get it out.
Yeah. We're over budget. We're over schedule.
Yeah.
Let's put it out.
Exactly.
And then you play it for a year. I remember years ago there was a band called I don't know if they were big in the UK, the New Bohemians.
Oh yeah.
So and I remember reading an interview when I was young when they and the guitar player who later became a good friend of mine. It's crazy. Said, I'm going to play the solo from the very first hit, the same way for the first year. Then after that, I'll play with it. But right now, the fans want to hear the solo.
Yeah.
And then reading an interview a few years later saying, halfway through the first first month, I was like, no, man, he found his groove for it,
Yeah.
So you find the life of the song as you play it live. And I'll be the first to say I wasn't a fan of Duran Duran.
Right.
So I've heard the songs the way they are in the albums now, but for the first 3-4 years that I'd hear the song on the radio and I'd be like, that's not, because I'd only heard what I hear,
right?
And I'd say, no, that's terrible.
Yeah.
Because I'd only heard it live. But
yeah, sure. Yeah.
But so I get it. I get that, man. Is there any piece of your rig that you can't do your job without on any gig? The one constant.
Oh, crikey. Snapshot automation.
Mm-hmm.
Is that wide enough?
Well, for me, it is.
Right. I mean, it's not a piece of kit. It's a workflow.
Yeah.
I mean, for a piece of kit, I would say.
No, the snapshot automation. That's good. I'd like if you'd explain what that is.
Yeah. Okay. So, snapshot automation coupled with the virtual sound check, because they go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of I guess, without bigging myself up too much, I think I probably started the whole virtual sound check thing way back in about 2001, when Yamaha brought out their first digital console that did full recall and snapshots and could integrate with various different console in and out units, and I sort of took it to its extreme and started recording, multi-track recording everything, and then figured out a way of actually getting it to play back through the console exactly as if the band was on stage, even if we, even if they weren't there.
Mm-hmm.
Which we now call a virtual sound check, but in those days there was no word for it. It was this crazy fucking front of house guy doing Craig David, playing last night's gig back through the PA at full show volume and tweaking everything live as if the band was still there. People were like, this can't possibly work. This is ridiculous. What the hell? You haven't, the band's not even there. And I'm like, it's an arena.
Yeah.
There's, the stage volume doesn't have any impact on me at all. And for most of the arena, we won't hear anybody off the stage. So what's the difference between the band being there and the band not being there? So that I'd already started using automation on a basic level with the last analog desk that I mixed on, which was like an Amec Neve hybrid console that had what they called virtual dynamics in, which was basically the first desk that had gates and compressors that you could program from one song to the next. So I'd gone from that to the PM1D and then this snapshot system and the Pro Tools rig, and kind of developed it to the point of, that is my workflow. I can pretty much do anything with that. I could pretty much do any gig probably without, I wouldn't want to, but I could probably do it without any hardware devices at all, I would say. With just gates and compressors and a few reverbs.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that's the truth of it. But yeah, that is the thing that I don't think I'd want to work without that anymore, because I'm very much a case of like I say, I imagine how something should sound, and it's gone from imagining how the band should sound overall to imagining how songs should sound individually as each, as separate entities, if you like.
Yeah.
And then advance that to, how I think each section of the song should sound in some respects, because sometimes it doesn't translate as well without a helping hand to go from, a loud section to a quiet section. Say, the band might play it really dynamically, a loud to a soft, and then back to a loud. So, say you've got a really quiet bridge.
Yeah.
The band might play it like so quietly that it gets lost. It disappears into the noise floor. And then you're in a situation where you want to turn everything up, because despite the fact that it's supposed to be a drop, it's not supposed to be like a parachute jump.
Yeah.
You're still supposed to be able to hear the bridge or the middle eight or whatever. So then you're into a situation where you turn the certain instruments up in the bridge and maybe change the tonality of instruments as well. And then it goes back into the chorus, say, which is the last chorus, and it's the biggest chorus. So you want to get a bigger jump or whatever. And then the other way around, that you might want to instill more dynamics. So the band plays that bridge too hard.
Yeah.
And it kind of loses the drop. And you think, okay, what I want to do is make this fall away, to be quite daring and to fall just that far that it feels a little uncomfortable. So then you've got a situation where you might have a song that's sort of the main section, and then, just because I've just done a bit of Duran Duran, I suppose Ordinary World, it starts big and then it drops into quite a small verse.
Yeah.
And then and then it builds into a guitar, a semi-solo section, and then it has a huge drop, and then it comes out of the huge drop. Oh yeah. So, for instance, with Ordinary World, and I've tried mixing it in so many different ways, and the best way it works is to have like 5 different snapshots for each section. So to lose all that, I'd find it quite hard.
Yeah.
The ability to do just that amount of detail because, you'd say, well, you can change a few levels here and there. That's what the faders are for. But I automate everything, like literally everything, apart from the lead vocal. And the actual lead vocal stays mostly out of automation. But even then, I have effect sends that come on and off, and go up and down in level and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But if I think, oh, in the drop the snare's too bright and the bass drum is too round, and so in the drop the bass wants to take over, and the bass drum really isn't a thing, and it certainly doesn't want to be clicky. But in the verse, it needs to be clicky. You're talking about dozens and dozens of things that change from one section to another. I mean, it's a great way of fucking yourself up if you don't know what you're doing. Don't get me wrong. You can bury yourself big time. And obviously, again, it's very much down to a consistency of knowing that what you're hearing is correct.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I do programming of the snapshots. I'll do things through the PA. I'll do things through speakers on the meter bridge. I'll do things through headphones and in ears to try and get an averaging, so that it's not just, oh, it sounded great on the night. Because I want it to sound consistent and great tomorrow night on a different rig in a different room.
So we were supposed to do this Sunday at some point during the show day, but I noticed you were programming almost up until doors. Is that what you're doing all day?
Yeah. So what we had there was, when I came back to do Duran, I did a few shows in January, sorry, to try and get the feel of what was going on. And then when we came back to this run, I kind of knew where I wanted to be, so I scrapped my show file from that January run and restarted. But because we've had so many different rigs and situations, so we had, a show where the PA was like Frankenstein's monster made of D&B and L acoustics and Mayer. I think there was some JBL in there as well. And you're like, for consistency, I really don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make any rash decisions just based on what I'm hearing on this rig. And then the next thing that we did was a pub for a billionaire sort of company.
Yeah.
And then the next show that we did was a festival stage for 50,000 people. The last two shows that we did in Omaha and then Vacaville, I had quite a decent time in the afternoon where I could sit down and actually examine where my fuck ups were.
Yeah.
On headphones and speakers, and go, actually, and having mixed a few shows and gone, that kind of didn't work when I expected it to, and that did work when I didn't expect it to, and then listening back and going, oh yeah, now I hear why. In isolation, I can sit and go, oh yeah, right, okay, I can fix that. And that way, the show file creeps forward and forward.
Yeah.
To the point where I'd say it's a mature show file, having done a few months worth on it.
And then, it's a show file you can pass on if you can't do a show and we have somebody come in.
Yeah, exactly.
Pass it on.
Yeah.
Say,
I mean, my joke was always, can you hear the vocal and then press next, as in next snapshot.
Yeah.
Of course, now it's even lazier because it's like, can you hear the vocal, and the time code advances the snapshot. So you don't even have to press next a lot of the time anymore. So it's literally just, I may be making it sound a little bit too easy, but, that is where I try and head.
Yeah.
Where the thing is kind of assuming that you guys on stage have this is where consistency comes in everywhere. If things, I would rather have something that sounds not quite right every night on stage than something that sounds great one night and terrible the next.
Yeah.
Because when something's a bit average or something's got a little bit of a hinkiness about it, say a keyboard's not very well or whatever, and it's like that every night, then you can deal with it.
Yeah. But if it was perfect one night, the next night.
Yeah. Then you're kind of like, how do I deal with that?
I would much rather have that too.
Consistency over all, uber alles.
I would like to sound consistently like shit, or rather than the bass sounds great tonight. The bass sounds like ass tonight.
Yeah.
But I'll deal with consistently good.
Yeah. That would be the best outcome for sure.
Yeah. So you work a lot, man. I'm sure your mind is always on the gig. How do you relax? How do you, when you're not working, how do you just kind of unwind?
Oh my God. Funny because it's a hobby as well.
Audio is a hobby as well.
Yeah, I got a mix room, here at home as well. It's not quite finished because I've had so much work in between starting to build it. But, funnily enough, I love gardening. That's my ultimate unwind. Plants. I love plants. I mean, there you go. That's
wow.
Yeah. So, I do a lot of DIY as well.
Right on. Do you still enjoy doing what you do, man? Do you still enjoy going out on the road and mixing bands?
Yeah. I love mixing. I don't enjoy travel as much because I don't
Do you enjoy staying
really
at the Phoenix in San Francisco, California?
Well, that's a funny one because the Phoenix I stayed with the second band that I kind of got into mixing live, which was the spring off of so remember I said I had that accident with Stephen Street's one of Stephen Street's bands. Two of those guys went on to form another band called Gene, who then I toured with for quite a while, and I stayed at the Phoenix with them in 1990, I would say 95, or maybe 94.
Yeah.
So, and it was exactly the same as I remember it. Exactly the same. God bless them for keeping it going. But I mean, right.
I think the hotel has a great vibe. It's just,
I think it does, and if you, I guess if you did it up too much, it would then cease to be the Phoenix.
Yeah. I agree.
If you, I just wish there was slightly better climate control in the rooms.
Agreed.
Like any at all.
Snake, if I were to ask some of your peers, cats that you work with, cats that you talk with, what would they say about you? One word, how would they describe you?
Oh God. Oh my God. Wow.
I asked Tom Wood. I asked Tom Wood one time, and I don't know if you've ever met Tom Wood.
Oh yeah. I've met Tom.
And he just said, I said, "What do you think of Snake?" And he just said, "Legend." So,
oh bless him. I was going to say, I hope people say I'm kind.
All right, that's good.
That's what I would. I don't give a fuck about the rest.
Right on.
I hope people say I'm kind. I try and be generous with my knowledge. I never want anybody else to fail. I'm not one of these people that's like, oh, I can't tell you how I do this, because like, I'm not saying I would like put my show file on the internet and go, you know, come and bid for my job with my show file.
Yeah. No.
But if somebody asks me, how do you do this, or what do you do to in this situation? God, I don't have any qualms about telling anybody anything, really.
No.
So
No.
you know,
No, well, that's always been my experience with you on the gig. That I remember not this last tour, maybe Paper Gods was the last time we toured together.
yeah.
I remember I was in an issue. I was having an issue with my rig, and I remember you coming up, and one by one we went through everything to find out what was going on, which you don't find that very often, especially
Yeah.
it's just like your rig.
Which
Yeah. So
I feel like I don't understand why anybody would not, because we're joined, inextricably by a piece of either copper or digital string
yeah.
of some description, whether it's optical fiber. Yeah, your gig and my gig are literally linked.
Yeah.
The same thing is, every input on that stage comes to me.
Yeah.
And why would I not want to fucking help somebody out that's, having an issue? Like, I find it weird when I hear that people go like, oh, that's your problem, just sort that shit out. Like, if you have an ounce of humility, for one thing, and technical knowledge that might help the situation, then what the fuck is the problem? We're all on the road to get shit done as best we can. And why would I want your rig to be buzzing or farting or doing whatever it has been doing in the afternoon that's killing you?
Yeah.
Why would I want that in my PA? I just don't understand why people would, and that's just from the selfish point of view, let alone like, why would you, leave a friend to hang out, like, to dry? It's the, that's one of my pet hates. Like,
Yeah.
I hate people that won't share information, and I hate people that will do that.
Yeah. I always think it's important
and
to share.
blaming.
Yeah. Share whatever share whatever knowledge you have. I don't have a lot of knowledge, but I'm always willing to share it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How
long do you think you'll be doing this?
Oh man.
I think all of us, we say, oh, this is my last year of doing it.
I think it's hard. It's hard to know, because I do really love it still.
Yeah.
I joke and I say things. I put something on the group chat the other day after one of the shows saying, oh, I'm back in my room already listening to the show. Anyone want to join me? And it's kind of half a joke, but actually I was.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to listen, when it's fresh in my mind of like, what didn't work in the room? Why didn't it work in the room? Was it a room thing while I remember, or was it something that's embedded in the desk?
Yeah.
In the mic.
Yeah.
So I love, I still love it that much. And, right before I was having this conversation with you, I was trying to figure out some technical crap, on the desk emulator that runs on my Mac. So, God, if I could do this in 3-week chunks, I could go on for a long time.
Yeah.
But getting older, family's getting older, so I did so before the pandemic, I did a couple of years with Harry Styles, and then I did some stuff with Duran, and then I did Spice Girls, and I did some more stuff with Harry, and then the pandemic hit, and then Harry was like the first kind of big act to go back out.
Mm-hmm.
July 21, and we finished July 23. And that was nearly solid. That was really hard. I can't imagine myself ever doing anything that's, like that. There's so much attrition in the crew. We lost so many people just because there wasn't time off. And, it was just very, very, people were emotionally drained.
Yeah. Yeah.
From being away for that long. So, I don't think the money's
Everyone has that 1,000-yard stare,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the last show, and it should have been a climactic thing. The last show we did in Reggio in Italy was 120 plus thousand people there. And I sat in the back of my truck, and I've got all these screens where I can see, the band, and I can see the audience, and I can see pretty much everything that's going on. And I was less than emotional about anything. All I could think of was dragging myself to the airport in the morning and getting on a plane and going home. It was 1,000-yard stare. We did, me and the playback guy used to joke and say, we felt like we're in the Band of Brothers.
Yeah.
It'd be 90 minutes of like being shelled, emotionally exhausting, mentally exhausting. There's a lot's riding on it,
Yeah.
I find the idea of just pressing the space bar in for playback and starting the count off. I mean, some of the Harry stuff. The band, it was a 10-piece band, and a lot of the time the click, the playback stuff was superfluous, really, other than the fact that it was driving the click and the time code, and the time code's driving all the visuals. So you could say that the playback could fall over and you wouldn't notice the difference in the mix, because it's actually not actually playing anything back as such. For some songs, I mean, for others it's more complicated. But for some songs, the playback could drop out and nothing would happen audio wise, but the whole goddamn show would stop because any automation, in the rig, in the lighting rig, you've got things moving around in the air, and the fireworks and all of it. If the playback stopped, then the band could carry on playing. It would sound exactly the same.
Yeah.
But the lighting would grind to a halt. My desk would be like, well, I'd have to press next for one thing instead of having it do it for me. But yeah, I think 2 years of that was like emotionally draining to the point of like, yeah, I think you get out at the end of one of those and you just consider whether you actually want to do this job anymore. Not because it was bad, just because it's like, wow, a long time away. And
2 years went by quick, but 2
nights.
years went by slow as well.
Oh, yeah.
So much happened in 2 years. What seemed like you being gone that much, everyone's 2 years older.
Yeah. And I'm in my 50s. So then suddenly you're nearer to 60 than you are to 50.
Yeah.
Because you've gone over that milestone in the middle, and it's like, wow, it's kind of nuts.
Someone once told me 50 to 60 goes like that.
Yeah, I can see that now, actually. But yeah, I mean, people would say, yeah, you did 15 nights at Madison Square Garden, sold out, or you did 5 Wembley stadiums sold out. What's that like? And it's like, that far into a tour that's that long, it's like an office job.
Yeah.
Madison Square Garden particularly, the hotel was near the garden. I walked from the hotel to the garden in the afternoon. We line checked. Then I'd walk back to the hotel and watch some Netflix crap or whatever, and then I'd walk back to the garden at about 8 o'clock at night, line check, do the show, and walk back to the hotel,
All right.
and repeat. Yeah, every day.
Yeah, I can relate.
Yeah, sure, indeed, the sphere, indeed. So,
Well, Snake, I appreciate
yeah,
your time, man. I appreciate you doing
no
this.
worries. Yeah,
I remember when I dropped my first
it's fun.
episode, you messaged me and you said, "Hey, good job. I do have some audio advice. Just hit me up when you have some time." I hope that's gotten a little better.
I'm sure it has.
But I appreciate you taking the time. Our podcast, it's called Is Breakfast Included? If we were having breakfast, which we did a lot on this run, what would you have?
Yes. Oh, what, the ultimate breakfast?
Yeah. No holds barred.
Yeah. No,
don't think about calories or health or anything.
No, all right. It would be the Benny at the Hoxton Hotel in Los Angeles. I don't know why. It's an eggs Benedict kind of thing. I don't know what they put in that hollandaise sauce, but I think it's got to be crack.
It has to be, right?
Yeah, I mean, for me to even remember that. Yeah, the Benny, the Hoxton, LA.
Right on, man. That's a good one. Well, it was good talking to you, man. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, no worries.
And I will see you
good to see
in
you.
a couple of weeks.
Yeah, in a few weeks' time. Yeah.
We'll all be together again.
Yeah.
All right, man. Take care.
Cheers, Pete.
All
Bye
right,
now.
bye.
See ya.
Right on. Karl Newton, better known as Snake. Pretty cool, huh? What he does out there. People think he's just turning knobs and pushing faders, but there's really a science to it, as we learned last week with Wayne. All right, guys, make sure you check out isbreakfast.com. Pick up a shirt. Make sure you check out the YouTube, Instagram. The podcast streams on all platforms, Spotify, Apple, Google, everything. Check it out. Tell your friends about it. All right, guys, I am done. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next week.